Okay, next we're going to have a few people come up and talk about the workforce development perspective. And with us we have Sarah Haneline. She's BASF Workforce Development and Talent Strategy Manager. As that manager, she's for BASF's largest manufacturing facility in North America. Sarah is responsible for managing efforts to attract, develop, and retain top diverse talent in the Geismar, Louisiana site. Her work includes building a pipeline of talent through local partnerships with K-12 schools, post-secondary institutions, workforce development boards, and many other working in the talent pipeline space. Her team is responsible for the talent acquisition, learning and development, and knowledge retention across multiple business units located at the Geismar facility. Her passion is for connecting people with opportunities and help them reach their full potential. And joining Sarah is Baraynia Robillard. She's the manager in supply chain Baton Rouge at ExxonMobil. With over 15 years of service, she's held supervisory, managerial positions with the supply chain, warehousing, procurement, projects, contracts administration, and business services across multiple organizations. She has a strong commitment for sustainability in manufacturing and professional development of not only her team, but also the contractor workforce. She serves as a leader at ExxonMobil Baton Rouge Area High School Summer Internship Program and mentors several future leaders across multiple ExxonMobil USA locations. She's active in the community, member of several industrial alliance partners, and in her role as contracts and commercial manager, she helps to identify top talent and standards of several that support our future pipeline. So please welcome Sarah and Baraynia.
Well, good morning, everybody. I wish I could start with a joke like David did, but I am not funny. So thank you, David, for that. I know I have tons of pages of apps all in my head that will make my life better, but my problem is action and application. So thank you for your perspective. Well, this morning, Baraynia and I are going to talk about workforce development from BASF and ExxonMobil's perspectives. We're going to first go through a few slides just to kind of set the foundation. I don't think any of this information, the data anyway, that we're going to share will be new to any of you, but we just want to give a starting point for some of the things we're going to discuss. So Francis introduced both of us. You heard a little bit about what we do at our respective companies. So Baraynia, do you want to add anything else to your introduction?
Not necessarily. So ExxonMobil doesn't necessarily have a full-time exclusive role within workforce development, but we are looking at that outside. But all of us has a bit and a piece of workforce development, and we recognize how important it is. That's really it.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. So I started my role doing workforce development at BASF, I guess about 4 years ago. And at that time, I was trying to find people at other plants who did the same job as me that I could learn from, share information with, and there was nobody. And so I'm glad to hear that other companies are thinking about that. I mean, I think there are people doing the work for sure, but having a focused person, I think, is kind of a new concept. So I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so how many of you have seen these statistics? This is from the Skills Gap report that Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute put together, I think in 2018 or 2019. And it said that by 2030, they're estimating that there will be 2.1 million positions that will go unfilled in the U.S. in manufacturing. Have y'all seen this data, this information? So I see some heads shaking yes and some no. Does this sound shocking to any of you? Some yes, some no, okay. So think about it in your businesses. Are you having any challenges with any of your direct hires or with your contract workforce? And then if you are, I'm guessing you're here today because maybe you are, multiply that, right, by all the companies in the U.S., and that's how we get to this estimated gap. 53% of the positions may prove difficult to fill due to the lack of qualified talent or skills. So for those of you who have been in industry for a long time, have you noticed that, or have you experienced in your companies that maybe people are coming in at that entry level point looks different today than it did 20, 30 years ago. I know that's something we are definitely, I wasn't here at BASF 30 years ago, but some of my colleagues have, and we are definitely experiencing that as well. Let's see. Next slide. So there are several consequences of not being able to fill the jobs that we have in our industry. And I won't go through every single one of these, but just some things. So 79% of manufacturers surveyed for this report said new product development and innovation is something that could be impacted by not being able to fill these jobs. 81% said maintaining production levels to satisfy customer demand is a consequence. And I know that's something that's important to all of us. 82% said increasing growth as measured by revenue. Again, something very important that affects all of us in our companies. So this is a real challenge. It's not just a data point. It's not just something that, those of us who work in this workforce development space are thinking about, but it has a direct impact on our businesses and our bottom lines. So the top causes of the skills shortage in the industry over the next 3 years, according to this survey, are new entrants have different expectations, thank you, for jobs and careers. So I'll just give a quick example of this. At BASF for our operators, a couple of years ago, we did some focus groups for specifically our female operators because we wanted to figure out, what's the experience of our females. I think like probably most of the industry representatives here, there are less females in our workforce, right, than maybe we want. It doesn't necessarily represent the communities that we live in. And so we wanted to figure that out. One of the biggest things that came out of that was that the females who have been successful, who've been working as operators or have moved up in operations into management roles, knew what they were getting into, right? So they knew someone who worked as an operator before. Maybe it was a family member, a close friend. They knew really what to expect as they came onto the plant floor. And so I think, as we talk about some of the things we're doing, giving people, students, the opportunity to see those jobs and what it's really like, I think is very important for us to help fill this gap. 36% of respondents said the lack of attraction or interest in industry by students and parents is causing this gap. I think we've seen, just a difference in with education and with life, right? With technology, advancements in technology, maybe not as many people are spending time working on cars or doing mechanically inclined things growing up because they're on their phones or they're on their tablets. And so that's a big change that's happened in our culture. I think there are some other things related to this, like misperceptions about what manufacturing is really like. What does a plant look like on the inside? Most of us have fences, right, around our facilities, and you can't just go in and walk around and see what it looks like. And so if you can't see it, how are you supposed to be attracted to it, or how are you supposed to know what's out there? And then the retirement of baby boomers, of course. That's a big population that is already retiring and will continue to be a significant data point of retirements over the next few years. Insufficiency in current U.S. education system and STEM talent. I think that's definitely something that we have to continue to work on. I know we have some educational institutions represented in the room today and are working very hard to address this. And then lack of effective job training programs. And I think the way I understand this is before people come to us. So how are people being trained before they come to our companies? And is what we're doing good enough as an industry, as a group of business, education, associations who are working together to solve this? Are we doing enough? Can we improve? So finding qualified talent is harder than it's ever been. So part of my role at BASF is talent acquisition. I can tell you we've had some positions, we have one position in particular that's been open since January. Think about that. If you're managing a unit or a team and you've had an opening for that long, that's a long time to go without someone who you need to do that job. And it's because it's hard to find. Right now, the competition for talent is really difficult for companies, right? And I think that the pandemic had a lot to do with that too, right? So people kind of are now thinking about work differently because of the pandemic, and because for me, for example, for 2 years, I'm about 2 years, I worked from home. I was home with my husband, with my child, and with my parents, actually. We all were living under the same roof for that period of time, and I did my job. I could do that, and while I like going back to the office and not being in the house with my family all the time, some people prefer that, and now that we've proven that we can do it, people want that flexibility, and they want to be able to do that, and so I think that's part of this as well. So those are the data points that we wanted to share. Baraynia and I are going to share some things that we're doing at our companies to address this. So first, Baraynia.
Okay.
I think I've done enough talking. So one of the questions that we want to answer for you today is, how are companies addressing this challenge through workforce development? So what are some things Exxon's doing?
So really, we're still developing, as I said, our workforce development philosophy, but we've done some work already. As an example, BRCC is here today, and we actually have a partnership with them, the North Baton Rouge Training Initiative. So hopefully you all have heard of it. We are looking to continue to grow that. In addition, we also do work similar to a lot of other companies, right, where we're volunteering at our local schools, elementary schools, middle schools. And within the last 2 years, and now we're about to go into our 3rd year, we've had our high school summer internship program. So it touches on some of the very things you just talked about, the challenges of not knowing what goes on behind here, right? You have a huge gate. I didn't even know ExxonMobil made rubber. So we've gotten a lot of really good, positive feedback from that. And really the key to all that is working with our educators, right? Listening, working with our partners, and that's including other industry partners, our suppliers, and really understanding where our students are and what they need versus what our historical context has been. And what about BASF?
Yes, we do a few things, and I'm so glad you mentioned y'all's high school internship program. I think that's so important, and I think actually in this room a couple of years ago, y'all won an award for that through Gabria, through the Workforce Development Award, so that's great, and I think that was the first time I heard about it. And for us, we're not doing anything exactly like that yet, but I might borrow that idea. So from a workforce development standpoint for BASF, we really think of it long term. We're not thinking about what we need today, even though we do need people today. We needed them yesterday. And so our, I guess, philosophy around this is really developing personal relationships with people in the community throughout their educational career. And so one of the things we do, I mean, we really, when I say throughout, I mean elementary school through college or technical college, through employment, through retirement. And so it's really that complete pipeline of talent. And so for us, we do some things. We have a Kids Lab program, which is a global program that BASF offers here locally. We ensure that all 4th graders in Ascension Parish get to participate in that. They go to the Louisiana Art and Science Museum here in Baton Rouge, where they learn about how chemistry is in the world around them. And so, do I think every single one of those 4th graders is going to come work for BASF in the future? Probably not, but I want some of them to, right? And, not only are they learning about chemistry, but they're also learning about BASF and the products that we create. And, one of the things, Baraynia, you said, you didn't know ExxonMobil made rubber. Well, most people don't know exactly what our companies make. And it's stuff we use every single day, right?
Right.
And so I think it's so important for children, high school students, middle school students, all the way through adults to really understand that.
Right, and even their parents, right? So that was another, I guess that's what we're finding. Sometimes parents don't necessarily know these are high-paying, high-yielding, very fulfilling jobs and careers that you can have within manufacturing. And I mean, we have a lot of local resources, super talented, even in the North Baton Rouge area. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. We're certainly looking at, hey, we have challenges, but you can have a fulfilling, awesome, amazing career throughout. But we also recognize they didn't even know, right? So that's why we started the high school internship program. But I'm so happy to hear that you all have something very specific and targeted for elementary. So that's maybe something we'll probably look at as well. Thank you.
We're glad to share. So a few other things as we think about workforce development and that personal relationship that I talked about. As kids, we want them to be interested, curious, right, in STEM. And so our Kids Lab program is one of those, working with educators like ExxonMobil, getting in the classrooms, right, and having those students see people who look like them and hear about the jobs that they do, so we can connect. Okay, you really are interested in chemistry, you're really interested in putting things together, taking things apart. What can that be for a job? And so we spend a lot of time doing that. As kids progress through middle school and high school, we have a summer camp that we actually partner with ExxonMobil on, where we bring from Ascension Parish schools high school sophomores and juniors into RPCC, and Cherry Wells is in the back, one of my favorite people in the world. She helps us with our summer camp program at RPCC. And what we do there is we bring the kids to RPCC in the morning. We spend the morning in a classroom setting learning about a type of career that we have in our industry. And then that afternoon, we take them, the students, to tours of locations that do whatever that kind of career was that we talked about that morning. And so we've taken our students to the ExxonMobil Port Island Lubricants facility
yes.
in the past. We take them to welding shops, fabrication shops, electrical shops, just so they can see, this is, if you really are interested in this kind of job that maybe you had never heard of until today, this is what that job looks like. This is how much money they make. This is how you get that job from an education perspective. And so in my opinion, kids need to know all of their options, right? And school isn't created to do that for them, right? School's created to give them the academic, the educational foundation they need. And so I think it's our role in industry to work with education to help provide some of those options and make the connections for them.
I agree with you.
Some other things. Okay. Some other things as from a BASF perspective, as students move through their careers. So ExxonMobil has their summer internship for high school students at BASF, and I think ExxonMobil does this too. We have internships for college students, of course. I'm sure most of your companies offer something like that. So anything you want to share?
Yeah, so that's the internship program we have with BRCC. So historically, it's been primarily around mechanical inclined craft careers. So electricians, welding, pipe fitters. Right now, we're looking at an opportunity to really include process technology, right? So I think that I've even heard overwhelmingly at some of the tables a need to expand and look at where we're getting process technicians from, and are they skilled? And so we actually have that ongoing partnership. So we do bring them in a 6-month internship at ExxonMobil, paid, and then that can lead to coming directly as a full-time employee through our apprenticeship program as a full-time employee. And then similar to what you said, a relationship throughout your career. Similar to BASF, we aren't necessarily hiring someone for one specific job, but for a lifelong, fulfilling career where you meet your full potential. So that is one of the internship programs that we have directly with BRCC. And I think we're also potentially going to expand that to other universities as well. But I can't speak to that directly.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we also offer an internship program with RPCC, and actually any student can apply for our P-Tech, process technology, and instrument technology internship programs. And I think over the last couple of years, we've talked a lot at the site about why do we need operators with a P-Tech degree? Do y'all talk about these things? Do y'all hire operators with P-Tech degrees? So it's not a requirement for us, but there's been some research done that shows that students with, or individuals, candidates with a P-Tech degree, the educational foundation that they receive on entry-level exams is equal to someone with 5 years of experience without the education. So we're saving some time, right? They still need a whole lot of training, right? My BASF people, they still need a lot of on-the-job experience, but having that academic foundation is hugely important for them to understand the processes, to understand the technology, right? Technology has changed significantly. I mean, we still have operators going out and using tools and being very hands-on, but maybe the way we do that using technology, the way we train using technology has changed a little bit. And so having individuals who are willing to use technology, right?
Right.
Is huge.
It is huge. It's so huge. I mean, especially when you mentioned like the changes in our demographics. So that's certainly been something that we've recognized. Some of our older demographic isn't as willing to adopt some of the technology, whether that's the iPhones, the apps that we have on the iPhones, how to use some of the various things that we're even going to talk about inside this room. Whereas when you have some of the different generations, maybe millennials, Generation X, some Zs, they are more inept and willing, right? They recognize TikTok. They recognize Twitter, and they are happy to utilize some kind of application versus going out and doing it a more traditional way. So I think that that is optimal, and I think that that's, yeah, I agree with you.
I didn't send you this question in advance.
Okay.
Okay. So one of the things, so I'm on the Cabria Contractor Workforce Development Committee, and one of the things we focus on is our contractors. And I know you're very involved in that space.
Yes.
So what are some of the challenges you're seeing there, and any perspectives that you want to share?
So I would say we have some of the same challenges that we have as with our employee workforce. Historically, we've employed as full-time hires people who've had experience with some of our contractors. Unfortunately, our contractors are seeing the brink of the issues before we are, whether that's timeliness in coming to work, when it comes to professionalism. I mean, just general behaviors that a lot of us may have been taught a long, long time ago and enact them every single day. So those are some early career opportunities that we're seeing with some of our contractors. And they're also seeing a lot of issues with retention, right? So even if they're able to hire somebody and they have a really skilled worker, I mean, there's so much competition for some of the same personnel that leads to that 2.1 million. They're having a lot of losses, the same way we are with ExxonMobil, right? So, I mean, it's across the board. It's not just an ExxonMobil, it's really truly an industry problem.
I agree with that too. And for us, you know, when we think about like people we hire directly, a lot of times that pull for us is our contractors.
Correct.
Right. And so if our contractors are having this issue of getting people in the door, retaining them, then that directly affects us. It directly affects us either way.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
But it affects us in our long-term strategy of who we're hiring, because we like that they've worked in industry whenever we hire them full-time. We like that they've been at the plant. We like that they've seen the equipment that they'll continue to work on.
Correct. They like that they have some idea of what we mean by safety, what our processes are, what our procedures are, what our kind of life-saving rule violations are. I mean, those are super important, right? Otherwise, you're starting from scratch every single time. Yeah.
And from a bottom line perspective, that costs money.
Every single time.
Right? It takes time and money to onboard someone and get them ready to be fully productive. And so the sooner we can get them in, the sooner we can get them started and really going, the better. And so there's this ripple effect that's happening from our contractors all the way through our direct hires.
Yeah, I agree. So do you think that we'll have an opportunity to really close these gaps?
I'm an optimist.
Okay.
So I want to say yes. Okay. You know, I think that we're all in this room together today because we want that, right? I don't think it's easy. I think that there are a lot of pieces that are in play here that have to come together, and I don't think any of us can do it alone.
100% agree with you. I would also say that I think we have a lot of untapped resources and human capital that maybe we haven't considered before, which is some of the things that we are trying to do within ExxonMobil, and even like you said, making sure our young children, students are exposed. A lot of us may or may not have even known, hey, I'm a first generation within ExxonMobil, so and maybe, there'll be other generations thereafter. So I think there's a huge opportunity in front of us to let people know there's still fulfilling careers that you can have within manufacturing that lead to long-term success. So I'm like you, similar to you. I believe that we optimistically can fill these gaps.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you said, looking at untapped potential, right? So I mentioned earlier about the number of females, or the percentage, we'll use percentage of females in our industry. We're both female, but we're the minority, right?
Yes.
At our companies. And so, to me, if in the U.S. females make up about half of the population, maybe they should make up half of our industry, but they don't know that. Right. And maybe they don't see themselves as or see our industry as an option for them. So, what do you think about that? I mean, I'm in HR, okay, but why did you choose manufacturing?
Oh, okay. So I chose manufacturing. So when I graduated, full truth, right? I was just looking for a job, even though I should have been looking at a career. And it's just become something that's grown on me. I mean, I absolutely love it. I mean, I didn't have the opportunity to do some of the things you did during the pandemic, like spend all my time at home. I was actually in the plant, supporting operations, supporting making sure we had the right PPE, making sure that safety was done well, making sure that employees had everything they need. And I love this. I thrive off of this. I love emergency management. So that's what's attracted me to it. That's what's kept me here. That's what's exciting to me every single day. I love working with my coworkers. I don't care if it's a man or a woman. I don't have any issues whatsoever. But what I do recognize, like if I was actually, perhaps in a more kind of field environment, per se, is maybe there are some opportunities for us to have a little bit more empathy towards women and what their needs are in the workplace. Versus maybe what some of our men have had. And that may require all of us to kind of step outside the box and understand and be willing to hear what women need versus, what men may or may not need. But I have had no problems. It's been awesome. I love it. I love being a minority. I love, minority is both a woman as well as an underrepresented minority. And I can truly see like the changes. I feel the support, and that's what's kept me here. So human resources perspective, what does the data say? Why are women here? Why are they not coming here? Can you give us some perspective there?
I can give a little bit, I think. So I think part of it is, what I said earlier, they aren't seeing themselves. So when we think about, from a workforce development perspective, part of our role is advertising. Right. So, we have a very tiny budget that we can use for advertising. But when we do, we always include a female. So, and hopefully you've seen some of our billboards around town, but we always have a female, we always include an underrepresented minority, and we always include a white male, because that represents our workforce, right? Mm-hmm. And we want all three of those groups to see themselves at BASF and see that they can belong. So I think, talking about empathy and things like that, that's about equity, right? And so I think a lot of our companies now have this focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, I think a lot of things that happened over the last few years have pushed for that and kind of, in many ways, forced companies to really have this focus. I think both of our companies have been focused on that for much longer than just the last few years. But I think that's a big part of it. I think also from a data perspective, just looking at the last few years, I'm sure everybody's heard the term the Great Resignation. So that's happening across the country. At BASF, I think it's not as severe as maybe the total workforce as a whole in the U.S. And I think we're unique. Our industry is a little bit unique in that. However, where we are seeing an increased number of resignations is our females, especially those on the front lines in those technician roles. And I think just looking at the last couple of years, I think part of it is just the stress from the pandemic. Right. People having to choose, how am I going to take care of my child who can't go to school for 2 weeks because they had a COVID exposure? I don't have anyone else, who can stay home with my child. I think that's part of it. But I do keep going back to, are we showing the full talent pool that they can be successful in our industry?
I think we still have some work to do there, but I'm really happy to hear some of the things that BASF is doing. I love hearing that, even with some of the things you talked about in regard to I think it's a week, 2 weeks that you all do with all the different companies like ExxonMobil. I think that's really recognizing that there's an opportunity here, and it's recognizing for even young women, young ladies to realize, hey, this is something that I can be a part of as well. So I think we have a ways to go, but it doesn't mean that we can't get there. We all started off somewhere. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. So my last planned question.
Okay.
So how can education and industry work together to help fill this skills gap?
Okay, so I don't remember this being a planned question. So I would say, to me, the way that industry and educators can work together is really listening. I think it starts with listening with a dynamic ear and really actively engaging, right? So that can come in a lot of different ways. That can be, hey, let's do an advisory board. Let's work together. It could be mentorships. It could be internships. It could be what can we do more to come inside the classroom? So there are opportunities where we often go inside the classroom as well. And then it's also kind of taking a step back and saying, what are we missing, right? So sometimes we can be the only two people or the only people in the room, but there are other people outside of this room that we can go to, right? So sometimes it's figuring out outside of maybe what we do in traditional oil and gas and maybe our traditional partners, and maybe looking at some untraditional partners and what some of the things that they're doing and how can we implement those. Now, I don't have some specific examples, but I'm just assuming, I'm hoping, I'm thinking that those may be some things that we can do together and making some changes. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work within education, continuing to fill the skills gap, and making sure that we don't continue to have gaps long term. What do you see?
I don't think I have a better answer than that, but again, I think we have to work together, right? Like this is not something ExxonMobil and BASF can solve. We have to work with our educational partners, and I think we have to look at it very holistically, right? Yes. So the things that BASF is doing that attracts students to our industry will benefit ExxonMobil. It'll benefit the other companies in this room. It'll benefit our contractors. And so how do we do that at scale? We need to, we can only do so much, right, between the two of us. And so how can we all work together to do that? And I'm sure many of your companies are doing those things as well. I think I love what you said about listening. I think y'all have, like the North Baton Rouge Training Initiative is probably a good example of that. I think our Louisiana Community and Technical College system has done a good job of listening to us, their customers. When we come to them and say, we have this gap, we have this need, how can you help us, partner with us to find a solution? And I think they've done a good job with that.
I agree.
So I think we have about 10 minutes, a little less than 10 minutes left. And so I did want to give an opportunity for questions. Okay, we have one right here.
My name is Baxter Associate. I'm with the LCTCS group. We're the Manufacturing Extension Partnership of Louisiana. I'm the operations director, and got a lot of years in engineering, manufacturing, and such. But it just so happens this is a story about teaching the young people how exciting manufacturing can be, what we do. So I happen to have 5 daughters and 1 son, and so it's about bringing my daughters to school one morning, and I just had gotten a position as an engineer at Chevron. Real excited about that, and didn't say a whole lot about it at home, but my daughters knew. So I'm on my way to school one morning, bringing them to school, and one of them points out the window like, "Dad, is that the Chevron you work at?" I'm like, "Yeah, baby, Dad doesn't work at the gas station." But to just say that point to say that I don't think we do a good enough job, maybe as parents. Everything starts in the home, right? Explaining to our kids how these careers can benefit them. And my own children thought I worked at the gas station down the street, And so, and Chevron for a while, I think we've all gotten so hyped up on safety, and it's a great thing. We need to save lives and all this, but what some of those companies used to do well that I think we've gotten away from is bring your kid to work day and explain to them what goes on all day long in your career. And so I think to your point earlier, as parents, we should also either be courted by these companies and also be teachers to these kids, because we're missing that. We seem to have lost that a little bit. Thank you. Good point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for sharing that. We at BASF, we still have we call it Kids Day, and we have a Teens Day. The kids don't get to go into the plant, but they get to come to the site, right, and do activities. I was talking to one of my friends that works at RPCC, whose dad retired from a plant, and she said they used to go to bring your kids to work day and play in the water from the cooling towers.
No, ma'am.
So that has changed a little bit. We can do it safely, right? Are there any other questions or comments?
So I have is there a question?
Just a quick question. How early are you bringing your interns in out of the P-Tech programs? How early in their schooling?
For BASF, we try to bring them in when they're about to graduate. So in their third semester, but we also open it up to recent graduates of the P-TECH program. So someone who's graduated within the last 1 to 3 years can come in as an intern.
So BASF is a little bit ahead of us in that curve. So right now we're trying to work such that we are getting them when they graduate or recent graduates. Unfortunately, we've gotten them at about 1 year finishing P-TECH school, right? But we want them to complete the program before really coming in. So we are looking to do that really in 2023.
Yep. And I'll add
Going
one more
forward.
thing. We've BASF in the U.S. in 2021 launched an apprenticeship program. So I know other companies, Dow, for example, has an apprenticeship. I think you guys have an apprenticeship
Yes, we
program.
do.
And that's before they even start P-TECH school. So we bring them in, no experience required. We want them to have some potential, right, and some kind of basic mechanical aptitude. But we pay for their school. We pay them to learn on the job. And then when they graduate, they have the ability to perform the full-time role.
Ours is a little bit opposite. You can go ahead and ask your question. So ours is a little bit opposite in that we bring them on as interns for 6 months. They will have already taken our test to, take the first step. And if we're pleased with the performance, then they can go right into the apprenticeship program. So our 6-month internship is paid less than the apprenticeship program, which basically is full-time employment. Okay.
Do you guys do anything for the Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day?
I'm so glad you mentioned that. So tomorrow we actually do something with Introduce a Girl to Engineering. It used to be a really, really huge program. We're trying to get back there. We reduced a bit with COVID-19 and the pandemic, so we're trying to get back to where we were. But we are still actively engaged with Introduce a Girl to Engineering.
We do not. I think we might need to borrow this idea.
Oh, goodness.
So.
Okay. Happy to share.
So y'all spoke quite a bit to the gap in terms of operations. Are y'all seeing that as well in engineering?
So we are seeing it within engineering. We're also looking at other opportunities, like using international firms and accounts when it comes to the gap within engineering. But we are still doing a lot in that area, such as Introduce a Girl to Engineering. We're trying to make sure that people recognize and realize, hey, we still have phenomenal, exceptional opportunities within manufacturing as engineers, and a really great career path that you can continue to progress. But yes, we are seeing the gap within engineers, scientists, physicists, you name it, the gamut is there.
Yeah, for us, I would say not across the board in engineering, but in specific disciplines. So I&E engineers are very difficult for us to find and to hire. I think now we're competing with tech companies more than we ever have before for that type of engineer. And so sometimes we can't compete with salaries, with the hybrid work environments or fully virtual work environments
Locations.
because we're a manufacturing plant. We want our people to be at the
site.
plant, at the site. Okay.
Anybody else? So a question. First, talking to some of our customers, and you mentioned there's a 4 million gap in the industry. Talking to some of the customers, the retention rate is 75, 80%. So that even makes it more challenging. And it's not always based on the hard skills. It's more the soft skills, the culture and the behavior where, once they get into the plant, they realize it's not for them. So kudos to both y'all for having those internships, giving them the opportunity to come to the site, because I think that's where the bigger challenge is them fitting into the culture. And it's not them fitting in, it's just recognizing what they're signing up for. So it's more than a 4 million person gap. It's really like 5.5 million person gap. So really, as we start training this younger generation in manufacturing, we got to remember the soft skills, not just the hard skills. And then one other point is, I heard you mention the small budget you have for marketing. So I spent 30 years with DuPont. All my time was at the plant sites. And there always seemed to be a disconnect between the plant sites and maybe business leadership or corporate leadership. So my question to you all is, how are you driving that? How are you solving that challenge? Because some of the successful companies do have workforce development from the plant sites all the way up into their corporations, and they recognize this is a challenge that they have to solve, and be curious how you're solving that?
So for BASF, in North America, we have what is called a Manufacturing Community Steering Committee. We don't have a COO in the U.S. or in North America, and so this committee serves sort of that purpose. And it's made up of our operations leaders for the businesses and some one HR person, and a few others. And so that committee is really responsible for listening to its constituents, which are our plants, our sites. And so through that, I think we're able to drive some of that. They hold many of our external partnerships with organizations like the Manufacturing Institute, the National Association of Manufacturers, where workforce development is a key topic. And then at a site level, I think we're, in Geismar anyway, we're very fortunate that our site leader, we have several vice presidents of operations for the business units for BASF that sit in Geismar, and so for them to see results. One of our site leadership team members was here, he stepped out, and he said, we were talking about something else, but he said, I'm from Missouri, I want you to show me the results. And I think being able to get in the room to talk about these programs that we're doing and then connect them to business outcomes is very important for us to be able to just help them understand that this is a key strategy to impact the bottom line.
Absolutely.
So ExxonMobil is doing something similar. So really not a whole lot to add there, but what I would say is that some of our more traditional companies to kind of compete within that 4 million skills gap, it may be an opportunity for us to kind of think a little bit differently, and I think I'm hoping we're going to touch on that. So I'm a millennial. Please don't age me. And so, some of the things that I'm looking for, and even some of Generation Z, some of our younger population, even younger than I am, that are coming in, their needs, their desires, their requirements are a bit different than, what we've been used to. And so it may require some flexibility and not just saying, this is the culture you need to accept, because they are willing to say, I'm not accepting it. So I think that we all need to be open to that and recognize, where are we willing to do something a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm a millennial too. I'm an elder millennial. But so to kind of to talk about the soft skills point, what we do, we have competencies. So as in your annual review, there's the what you did for the previous year. So what did you accomplish? But equally important is the how you did it. And so if you're running everybody over to accomplish your task, that's not good, right? And so communicating the expectations, I think, up front, because those are all soft skills related. How are you communicating? How are you collaborating with a team? Those are equally important to the technical skills.
Agreed. We call them behaviors, and we are ExxonMobil leadership behaviors. So that's around your resiliency, adaptability, collaboration, some of the same things. And I think that is common across probably all of us. We don't just want people who have the skills, but we also want to know that you can get along with others, you can work well with the team, some of those kind of traditional things that we've always had since elementary.
Okay, great. Sarah, Baraynia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.